this is a team that you can be proud of. This is a team that is enjoyable to root for at a time when the sport on the men's side in the US needed something to rally around and needed something to push it forward. Obviously, the women have done it heavily, but for this men's team, you needed faces that people would know and like for reasons on and off the field. And I think that's what you got over the last few weeks was the way they played on the field set the stage to show their personalities off the field. And you have now a team and stars that people can root for and people can rally around and can sort of be the face of this and push it forward. And you got to be there to enjoy it, right? And that was the first step, and they got there. And I think I agree with you in that the last 2 weeks have been really enjoyable. And I think people will walk away again after the Landon Donovan Algeria goal celebration saying, when is the next US men's game? I can't wait to watch. I want to tune in. Where's Tyler Adams playing? Who are these people? I think that was an accomplishment. It also personally, like you said, was an enjoyment. Like, I want to watch this team more, and I'm back in. And I don't know that that was the case over the last few years. And I think that was probably the biggest part of this tournament.
And I like your point about the individuals, because we've had enjoyable U.S. men's national teams in the past, but it feels like this group of humans is more, it's easier to latch onto them. It's easier to have the experience with them, to enjoy it with them. And I thought we've seen that really come out in this tournament, that we knew that they had personalities. We knew that they liked each other, that they were fun, but it does feel like over the 4 games, it wasn't just about the soccer. It wasn't just about the 90 minutes, but actually the people on the field and the humans were people that fans and everyone across the country could connect with, which I'm not sure we've had in the past like we have right now.
Yeah, Tyler Adams became a star, right? Like the way he conducted himself, especially during that Iran press conference. And then, of course, the way he played, even though, we'll get into it, but that first goal of his, or goal of the Netherlands, that does fall on him. But he became a star. He is like something close to a household name. Pulisic got his moment. Weston McKennie, I think, had some standout moments. Yunus Musa, especially with that smile of his. I think there was a connection formed. And I'll just echo everything Bobby said. Like, yeah, we lost today. I loved the way the U.S. played, man. Like, even in a loss, it feels really close to how I felt 20 years ago in that loss to Germany in the quarterfinals, because the U.S., like, they were clearly the better team on that day in that game, and it was just the Germans in the knockout round. I'm not going to say that it was that level today. The U.S. were not the clearly better team. I think Louis van Gaal put together a masterclass of a plan, and that the Dutch executed it. But to see the U.S. play with zero fear, to not go into a shell, to keep pushing and to do so in smart and effective ways, even after you're down 2-0 because of a couple of young player mistakes. It was invigorating. And that's how I feel after this whole thing. After the 4 games that we saw from this young team, all of it was so dope. Like, it was great to watch a team with an identity and a point of view, and these young, talented kids executing upon it together against the best teams in the world. Like, that's what I want. And we hadn't had it in so long. And it felt really good to watch it again.
Bobby, you said something similar to me before the show.
Yeah, Matt, I want to add to that, because I think one thing that's important to do in these moments is contextualize the situation, right? What does this mean? How should we feel? What should we take away from it? And the way I think about it is in 2 parts. I'm not sure that the results are, it's always true that you shouldn't focus on the results. I think the results in making to the second round are table stakes, right? I know we celebrated after the last game. I know it was fun. The most meaningful part is that it gave us 90 minutes to enjoy it again. But for the U.S. men's national team, making the knockout stage is the expectation, right? That is the table stakes of this program. They've done it 4 out of the last 6. They've been doing it since 1994. It's been happening for decades, right? But to what you said, Doyle, it's the way the games looked. It's the shape of the game. It's the fact that when you watch the U.S. men's national team against the Netherlands and against England, you weren't sure who the world powerhouse was. That when you watch the team against Wales and Iran, for the most part, it was very clear that the U.S. was the protagonist and that the U.S. was the better team on the day, which we could not say in those previous runs to the knockout rounds. And the amount of control this team has, the amount of bravery, the ability to play in different ways, the ability to take it to anybody in the world, that is what's different. So it's not about the results, which are more about an extra 90 minutes to have fun, but the shape of the game and the way they took place, that's the exciting part. That's the reason to be optimistic, because that's what suggests that there's more of it to come.
Isn't it also that it's young players doing that, and that hasn't been the case for the U.S. in previous iterations? Sure, you've had the Landon Donovans and DeMarcus Beasleys of the world. You've had the guys that have broken in that way, but it's the fact that on its almost entirety, outside of old man Tim Ream that got called in at the last minute, maybe you could say Walker Zimmerman, who's in his prime, but you have Robinson, you have Richards that would have been there in their stead had they been available, that this is a young team without the benefit of World Cup experience that are the ones doing it, and it will be a younger generation still that push them and get to the levels that allow them to be comfortable in these moments in 2026 against world-class players. Like, to me, I agree with you guys on the performances, everything else, like in the immediacy, yes. But as far as looking at the future and thinking about the path of U.S. soccer, like, these guys aren't the only ones who have done it, but they have created that path. They've created the path for the 15-year-old that's watching this and is now in the backyard banging a ball Bobby Warshaw style against a garage. They've created a path for hundreds, if not thousands, of players that for previous generations, were they playing the game? Were they there? Did they have the pathway? Did they have the examples? Did they have the role models? Did they have the coaches, the facilities, everything they need to be more players that can impact the World Cup, that can play at Chelsea, at Juventus, that don't look out of place in the Premier League? Like, to go to what you always say, Dave, like, this is just the beginning. That's the exciting part for me, to see these guys do it without the benefit of having the dry run in 2018 for some of them, to see them do it without having 8, 9, 10, 12, maybe even 15 guys that are just like veteran stalwarts that you can't boot out of the team. Like, they did it on their own. They made this story on their own, and now that's the story that continues. Now that's what these young kids can pick up, and there's going to be a freaking army of them, and that's what's so exciting for me. This feels like just the beginning of, like, what I hope would be a golden era, or the beginning of one for the U.S. That looks different than any of the ones in the past.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's the point I was going to make as well. And I think that in what you're saying, Bobby, of, well, the performance style was there, the results were standard. Well, then that was an unknown. We didn't know that the U.S. trying to reset and bring the youngest squad to the World Cup, and let's be real, build towards 2026, would be able to get the results at this World Cup. The expectation, again, is where it is, but it wasn't the last 5 years. They didn't even get to the last World Cup. So while the U.S., I think you could say in 1994 or 02, reset the standard, which was we get to the round of 16, that hadn't been true over the last 5 years. So you had to at least get back there. And as Weeby says, now I think it gets even stronger and stronger going forward, because even when you look at this game, everyone's talking to me about lack of depth. Yeah, well, you could barely get one roster together, right? The U.S. is building its first team right now. So there's no depth behind that because it didn't exist yet. And now over the next 4 years, you keep adding and adding and adding to that, and you hope it continues to get better and better. If now these players all step up and become starters, even if it's not at Chelsea, right? Like, if Pulisic becomes a full-time starter wherever he ends up at a high level, now the young guys who are pushing for minutes on their club teams can push for minutes on this team and don't have to be relied on where the game has to run through you.
Yeah.
Right? The moment you get on the field for the national team for Yunus Musa at 18, the game has to run through you for 90 minutes. And if you make mistakes or cannot play at that level, now you get the Landon Donovan, DeMarcus Beasley effect, which is when Landon played in 02, he was a winger who could attack guys and play free, because Claudio Reyna and John O'Brien and Pablo Mastroeni and Brian McBride, they were going to handle the battles. They were going to take a lot of the load off you. They were the ones who were going to take the ball at their foot when the game was against you. We don't have that right now. And that's the hope, is that this pool grows faster than a Poland or Colombia or whatever is capable of, because there has been a change in this country where those countries are kind of running along the same model and just hoping a special player pops out here and there.
Well, and there's more of a path. This goes back to what I was saying about the youth, Bobby, is like, it might not even be this generation that we just saw, this core that we're saying, hey, you need to go find that perfect club spot. But they've opened the door for the next generation to find that club spot, to get a club to take a chance on them, to make them a starter, to not have it be a scandal that Americans are in that position. And I think there's also just some, like, some experience and some learnings from a lot of these players and many before that of like, where is the right place to be? What is the right path to take? Like, because a lot of this comes down to being at the right club at the right time and making the right choices in your career to be in a position to be an important player and a starter in that moment, to develop in a way that when you're 23, 24, you get there. I don't think we've had that experience. Maybe that's with our players, our agents, our coaches, our GMs, probably across the board. Like, we just haven't exported players and had that success. The players, the countries that we're talking about in 1 through 15 have. That shit's old hat to them. So
not totally. Poland,
not all of them, but
Colombia, it's new. Ecuador,
okay,
it's new.
sure,
but
sure, sure.
But they're fitting
it's
into a model that
there
already
is much
exists
more
for
of a
them.
historical precedent there for them, and there's much more of a connection and a legitimacy based on previous
We
players.
got to do like an hour show about the Poland economy, GDP, the growth.
Totally.
Are we really considering Poland to be a better, a more talented team than the U.S.?
I don't think so. No, not Poland. Like maybe the top tier, four.
I would disagree with both of you. I understand the hope and excitement around the U.S., but I disagree that literally just Zelensky, who is better than Zelensky?
No, I said you give.
So
I'll give you like 4 or 5
is as well.
players.
So
I'm giving you those players.
Well, all the center backs. I don't agree with either, but it doesn't matter. We're splitting hairs there.
But it does. I think it does
this?
matter. Sorry, I think it actually really does matter. And Matt, I really want to hear your opinion on this because I know that you fight as hard for American players as anyone, and there's no right answer to this. But I truly think one problem with the Berhalter conversation is that the group of people, there's a section of people who see Pulisic at Chelsea and the players at Leeds and McKennie at Juventus, and they're like, we're a powerhouse, right? Why are we not beating Wales 4-0? Why are we not beating that? And like, I just think it's really important as a group to agree on premises moving forward. And I know that we can't get to an exact number here, but nobody else has had this conversation. Like, how good are our players? Right? What is the baseline here? So I'll take literally anybody that provides worthwhile insight is of value here.
I think it's a bigger discussion. I think right now we're a third tier team who needs everything to go right in order to beat a first tier team. We had that against England. The only thing that didn't go right was Weston didn't finish his chance. In this game, we were facing a second tier team, and they were more surgical. And we didn't have anything go right in terms of our fitness and form from our most crucial pieces, which was compounded by losing our starting center forward to injury before the game. If Sargent had been out there, I think maybe things would have looked a little bit different. But this level of the game, the margins are pretty slim, and I think round of 16, by definition, you're one of the 16 best teams in the world. That feels about right.
Yeah.
And the hope will be that 4 years from now, it's top 8 and maybe even top 4. And the difference between the U.S. and Poland, the Netherlands, Colombia, is that so much of this group is not even in their primes yet. And so there's very rational reasons to hope that, or to even expect that they will be much better 4 years from now.
What do we make of the way the roster was managed, selected, and used? Because you talk about subs and what could change. At halftime, is Gio healthy? Because otherwise, there's not a single other option on the team. Is that on Berhalter? Or is that the reality of the pool?
That's on Berhalter. I think the biggest knock on Berhalter is the central midfield subs that he brought. Kellen Acosta deserves to be there as a backup for Tyler Adams, and that's it. Like, he's not a number 8 at the international level. Neither is Christian Roldan, neither is Brendan Aronson. Both those guys are wingers at the international level in this system. Same with Gio Reyna. And then that leaves Luca De La Torre as the only number 8. And he got hurt 2 weeks before the tournament and clearly either was not fit or was not trusted enough to play. So there was no chance to take Musa out. And Musa's not a 90-minute player at this point in his career. He just has never shown that level of fitness. So there was never a chance to take Musa out in the group stage and replace him like for like. And that frustrates me because there were opportunities to integrate the likes of Pomykal, Eric Williamson, Keaton Parks into this group earlier this year or earlier this cycle, and Berhalter never did it. So my biggest gripe with him is that, like, I think he misidentifies some central midfield talent, and I think that put the U.S. in a position where they had to ride Musa to the point where, like, he came out and he was so leggy he couldn't trap the ball, and McKennie, he's been hurt all tournament, was only 60 minutes fit. That frustrates me. And then the other one is, I get the Jesus Ferreira thing because it works so well on paper. But I mean, thinking about what this team could have looked like with Brandon Vasquez or Ricardo Pepi, it's not the difference in terms of how they play today, but I think it would have helped, right? And the sport is about creating 5% difference here, and here, and adding, hopefully stacking all of that. And so, like, I think Berhalter got 85% of all that stuff right. But that 15% that he didn't, I'm not going to say it cost them today, because it's other stuff that cost them today, but it made today's job harder.
Can you say more on the center midfielders? Why do you not have Aronson and Reyna as center midfielder options?
Because Reyna doesn't win the ball, and doesn't really defend at all, no matter where he plays on the field. And Aronson, he presses forward every time. He treats 30-70s like 50-50s, and you have to have the right structure behind him to make sure that doesn't work against you. Because if you're losing one of your central midfielders 70% of the time he goes off to press, then the other guys are going to have to get into panic rotations and scramble. That's not how Weston McKennie plays the position. That's not how Yunus Musa plays the position. That's not how De La Torre, when he's fit, plays the position. It is how Paul McCall Parks and Eric Williamson play the position. And I think it made so much sense to just bring more like for like options, specifically to make sure that Musa and McKennie were at least 70 minutes fit in this game. Neither was.
Let's ask the question here that everyone started this thing out with. Who is the next coach of the U.S. men's national team? Is it Greg Berhalter? Is it not? What's the process look like? Weeby, start us.
I think Doyle made a good point. It's what I've been thinking about for a while, and that I think this tournament, just as much, if not more than so, for his players, as far as a stage to show what you can do and what your qualities were, that is what this was for Greg Berhalter. And he's not said this to me explicitly. I've had a number of 1v1 conversations with him. Yeah, so to be clear, he has not said this, but my feeling is that he would like to be a club coach, and that he's a guy that wants to work day to day, and he's all about, as Bobby said, system, and implementing ideas and having a project that builds and progresses. And I think it's hard to do at the national team level. And I think that while this job is going to be super attractive because of the 2026 aspect of it, because of the historic, weight that it will have, there will also be a ton of weight, and that weight won't come with built-in competitive games through qualifying for the next coach. So it's going to be a little bit of a limbo cycle unless U.S. Soccer is truly able to go out, and they should be, to be clear, they should be able to do this. They should do this to get into something like Copa America. Hell, let's do Copa America scenario again. Let's just say we're bringing it over here. Like, we're going to pour money into your coffers, South America, but we're going to do it selfishly, both for ourselves to have a dry run as far as the World Cup goes, but also to put our team in the position to be at their very, very best. I think he did more than enough for a team in Europe to look at him and say, this could be a good option for us. He's got experience in a number of different countries. I think he has that ambition, and the door only cracks for American coaches every once in a while. So when it cracks, you better be ready to jam your foot through. If he gets that opportunity, I personally believe that he will take it. That's just where I stand.
Yeah, it feels. Can I actually parse the question back for you and Matt David into two parts? Does Greg Berhalter want to be coaching this team in 6 months? And does U.S. Soccer want Berhalter to be coaching this team in 6 months? Are they the same answer? And how does it feel for each of them?
So my biggest fear is that both don't know, and they just end up stumbling along, which is sort of what happened with Bob in 2010, right? It was like, we don't know who's next. And Bob didn't know what was next. And he continues on. I don't believe in keeping the same coach for another cycle. I would add I have a different take on what Weeby just said, which the lack of qualifiers, the lack of competition. This is a unique opportunity to go to coaches who have specific systems and styles and say, this is the one time you have no stakes for 4 years and can implement it. Because I believe what happened for Greg was it came down to results at some point because he had to get to the World Cup. And like, obviously the big one will be Jesse. If you go to Jesse and say, yeah, it's going to take a while to build a cohesive pressing unit with an international team. And guess what? We've got 4 years. You don't have to qualify for the World Cup. We don't care about Gold Cups. We don't care about Nations League. Here's your one opportunity to coach a national team where you have time to build the thing you want to build. And I think besides being a host country, that is the other unique nature of this U.S. job for the next 4 years that you can pitch to coaches around the world. That takes me completely away from your question, which is I also don't think Greg wants to do this anymore. I think Greg likes soccer too much. I think he's tired of watching players play for their club teams all year and going and talking to coaches and directors. I think he wants to be on the field day in and day out. And I think you see that in some of his frustration with there was a lack of respect for the results. There's a lack of respect for him, I think. But I also think that comes with he's not 100% enjoying what he thought he would. And so you see sort of a little bit of a disconnect. And so I agree that I think he wants to be a club coach. I don't know who was making decisions at U.S. Soccer, so I can't speak to what I think they want.
Shouldn't it be Ernie and Brian?
Should be. Does that mean Jim Curtin's getting the job? Give me Jim Curtin.
I don't know.
One thing you care about or want to see for the USMNT from now heading into 2026.
I'll use that conversation as a transition to this. That I would love to see us have an elite facilitator come through, right? Somebody who can really control a game through their comfort in tight spaces, their reading of the rhythm of the game, of the tempo, right? Frankie de Jong, Verratti is that player. I had this Pedri is that, like, there's all these types of players that for everything we produce, we still don't have that. It was probably Darlington Nagbe over the last generation. But I would love to see that type of player come through.
Okay. Doyle, Weeby?
Thrash it. You're shaking your head. You can thrash it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
No, I agree with that. I just can't believe you think Frankie de Jong is that type of player. It's just insane to me. By 2026, before 2026, Yunus Musa will be so clear of Frankie de Jong. It's ridiculous. I want to see an elite center back. I want to see someone who can play like Tim Ream in possession with the ball, but is not a liability in the air. Tim Ream was great this tournament. I think you could argue a little bit with his body shape on the second goal, but like he was superb. But against the best teams in the world, he takes a lot off the table in terms of what you can do defensively. So my hope, and look, I honestly think that over the past 10 years, center back has become the hardest position in the game. It's no longer deemed. So I want to see whether it's Chris Richards or Miles Robinson finds another level, or man, I don't even know who else, like Brandon Craig or Fakranus, the kid from the Galaxy. Like
name ex Notre Dame alum who we don't know about yet.
Right, exactly. You know, like I want to see us develop that. That's the big thing.
Weeby?
Yeah, I took myself off mute intelligently because I think we got a training session going on above my head right now. I hope they're playing defeat. I'm going to keep it sort of macro and big picture in terms with the trend that we see already in Major League Soccer, because that's what we can control. We can't control how other soccer cultures, leagues, clubs, coaches perceive us. I want to see steady upticks in the percentage of minutes that that players in their teenage years play in this league. And I think that the congestion of the schedule and the way that Leagues Cup is coming, and I think Garth Lagerwey said it to me on Extra Time the other day, that it's going to force that given the way that rosters are constructed. I want to see more opportunities given to those players. And I think as we've seen over the last 5 years or so, the more opportunities those players get, the more you start to see that they're ready or can handle those opportunities. We need that to happen to then make the jumps to the leagues, to the places, to the environments in Europe that at tournaments like this put players on a platform to thrive at a younger age. So, you know, seeing Paxton Aronson make a jump, seeing what Brendan's done, etc. Like, we need the numbers game to increase way more. We need a lot more dice throws. and that comes from playing players in a professional environment and challenge them at a young level, so or an early age. So I want to see more teenagers playing in MLS as much as possible.